Well, Stanford's stout two-loss resume get a second look. Well, or will USC be too tough to beat twice as the Trojans look to win now with its man of the future? So let's talk some Pac-12 football. This is Pac-12 Breakdown. We come your way each and every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock on the West Coast, 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. I'm Mark Rogers TV, and it is my pleasure to talk each and every Wednesday night with Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree and also Conquest Chronicles, Donald King from Last Word on Sports, and I could have not planned this any better considering the matchup in the Pac-12 championship game where I got Don King, Mr. Cardinal, and then I've got Nick Dempsey, whose two sites are representing USC and Stanford. So if I don't have a wealth of knowledge here, I never will. So, guys, thanks for joining us. Of course, this is always a great breakdown. So let's start with the USC situation off the field because they announced this week with all the big names swirling and the possibilities of the next man of Troy, it turned out to be Clay Helton. So, Nick, your thoughts about retaining Clay Helton and making him the head coach?
Well, everyone seems to be pretty excited about it at USC, so I think that's good, particularly players and past players. I know Keyshawn Johnson, Marcus Allen, some of the legends are really in support of this hire. He's going to have a heck of a test. He's got Stanford, possibly a Rose Bowl, and then Alabama to start off next year. I think just looking around the college landscape, if you're going to keep with the college guy, then you might as well just stick with Helton, unless you can get some crazy, bizarre name that, has no interest. So I think it's good. I wonder if what it has to do with maybe the big NFL names turning USC down. I know they talked to Jack Del Rio, and he said no. There's conflicting stories about talking to Chip Kelly. So everyone seems to be excited about it, at least for now. We'll find out Saturday night how excited they all still are. But I think for now it's, a lot of enthusiasm. Everybody's pretty hyped up, and now they got to go out and actually do the job.
Nick, you make a good point that I hadn't thought of. Usually the head coach at that prime of a school gets San Jose State, Idaho, a couple warm-up games. But, yeah, extending into next season, Stanford, let's say Ohio State, and Alabama. That's quite a three-game stretch to get your college head coaching career off to. So, Don, as Nick mentions, popular choice, but was it the right choice for the Trojans?
Not to me. And it's easy. It's easy for us to say from thousands of miles away from Pat Hayden in the control center out there, but it feels like the safe choice. I think Helton's floor is higher than lots of the other ways it could have gone, and they're feeling rather burned with their last two flashy hires, so trying not to do the same thing they've done before. So I'll give them points for trying to break the trend. But I gotta believe USC is still one of the premier programs in all of college football history, and I gotta believe they could have done better than a guy. Kudos for the loyalty for a guy who was a two-time interim coach and kind of bailed them out of bad situations twice. So I'll give them points for rewarding him for that. But they just gave a guy who's taken a few laps around a dirt track the keys to a Ferrari. I might have found somebody who's actually driven a Ferrari before I made that move.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just talked to a guy in South Carolina discussing Will Muschamp possibly getting a second shot in the SEC Eastern Division. We've seen it with certain guys. Bill Belichick comes to mind, where he's the CEO, and maybe he learns from it the second time around. He's not any football smarter, but he's organizationally and psychologically smarter in dealing with the players and dealing with the structure, dealing with the media. Some guys are smarter than others, and they figure it out. Others just bounce from job to job and never figure it out past the football. So that will be an interesting thing to see.
Did you just say Will Muschamp and then Bill Belichick? I'm just checking.
Yeah, that was a same sentence comment, just like was made by was it Gus Malzahn? Was it Gus Malzahn who compared Belichick and Muschamp?
Oh my goodness gracious!
During SEC Media Days, I believe it was Malzahn. It was somebody in the SEC put those two guys in the same camp. So I did it
Unbelievable.
as well. So man, this might be the the bottom of any kind of broadcasting career that I've had. So it's up from here, and
Yeah,
you guys
let's
can
move
help
on.
me dig out of the hole.
Yeah,
So
let's
let's start.
Guaranteed to go viral now.
Yep.
So let's start, and that's what we're looking for, whether it be good or bad, whatever it takes, Nick, whatever it takes. So so let's head up the coast because there's, as you mentioned before we hit the record button, Don, where there's typically smoke, there's fire. Sonny Dykes has done a fine job in the last year and a half there at Cal, 1-11 to 5-7 to 7-5 with a bowl appearance upcoming. And he did interview at Mizzou. So is this possibly a case of him just testing the waters and doing due diligence to his own career in seeing what an established program has to say, or is he wanting out? I guess we can only speculate, Don.
It's 100% speculation. So let me lob that caveat out there before we even talk about this. But I've heard the phrase "burned out" at Cal, and you don't have to hear a whole lot of Sonny Dykes talking to understand his Southern roots. So something like Mizzou and the SEC has got to be appealing. And you're talking about a team not far removed from a couple of consecutive SEC East championships. Still would like to see the map the commissioner had when they put Missouri in the SEC East, but that's a whole different conversation. So there's some talent there. There's some pedigree there. It's probably a little bit more comfortable for Dykes geographically. So I could see the appeal there. I can't help but wonder, what else is there though that we don't know. He has, to your point, done a pretty daggone good job with Cal. They were a dumpster fire 3 years ago, and he's got them trending in the right direction and headed to a bowl game and got a great win in the finale over Arizona State. So, all of that looking good, and then he seems to be reaching for the escape hatch. It's a little bit baffling. So there's something behind the scenes there that I think we don't know.
So it's easy to see the win progression from 1 to 5 to 7 or 8 this season, but also the backstory there is that he had to take that 1-11 football team and clean house. There were like guys that didn't want to play football, didn't want to get together with the program, weren't just the type guys that you need to buy into a system, and he just rooted them out. And some of those guys actually left early to try to play NFL football. He also has advanced the very high academic standards in regards to the larger proportion of his football team meeting those academic standards. He's made tremendous progress there. So it appears as though Sonny Dykes has done, in addition to the football aspect, the periphery aspect of building a strong core and a strong program there at Cal. In addition, as Don mentions, he's a Texas boy, so going to Mizzou might be a caveat there that gets him closer to home and family and that sort of thing, and where he finds it familiar. So, Kalen Jones, welcome, Kalen, from House of Sparky. We've commented, Kalen, in the first couple of minutes on Clay Helton staying at USC and USC bypassing the big name to go with Clay Helton, and also the Sonny Dykes situation at Cal, where we don't know what the deal is, but he has interviewed at Missouri, so there could be a possibility of a guy that's lifted the Jeff Tedford issues away and been able to bring the program back to a certain extent. So any thoughts about those two situations?
Well, in regards to the Clay Helton situation, I think it's exciting. I know, obviously, they bypass on the big names. And when you're talking about guys like Chip Kelly, who I believe was rumored, or at least a fan favorite, a lot of people wanted to see him there, at least around here. I think it's a good thing that they stuck in-house, though, considering what Clay Helton was able to do with the personnel that they had so far. His utilization of the running game, especially when you're talking about the emergence of Ronald Jones and then Justin Davis really being able to stay healthy. I'm looking forward to see not only how the offense plays out, but having a guy who's seen all the tumultuous occurrences happen at SC over the past couple seasons, how he fares and kind of weathers the storm, so to say, in hopes of turning it around. In terms of the Sonny Dykes news, I mean, I woke up to it late yesterday. I didn't realize he was interviewing at all for the Missouri job, so I'm hoping the best for him. I think that he did a solid job, like you said, turning it around after Tedford was there. It was unfortunate that ASU had to go out the way they did against his team last week, but I'm definitely a fan of Sonny Dykes. He was a cool interview to have as well as Pac-12 at the Pac-12 Media Day, so I definitely hope the success, everything else for him.
While Kalen's throwing in the plug for his interview of Sonny Dykes, we're also going to mention that Sonny Dykes has appeared here on Mark Rogers TV twice as well.
There you go.
Nice.
So he's our one Power 5 get. So stay at Cal, or if you go to Mizzou, hey, we can work something out there as well. That would be fine. So this is going to be the Stanford show for the next, I don't know, umpteen minutes. So, Kalen, we'll stay with you and your thoughts about where Stanford's resume stands right now. Obviously, they have to win the Pac-12 championship game, so we have to assume that at this point if we're going to have a college football playoff talk, and that's what we're going to proceed with. So Stanford wins. Where do you place them in the talk?
Oh, wow. It's difficult because you're talking about Michigan State, Ohio State, Iowa, how that situation will play out. Stanford sitting at 7. I mean, you got to hope for either Iowa to I'm actually not sure. I can't lie. I don't know what you need to happen. You need everything to somehow just hit the fan and.
Yeah. Let me help you out.
I always defer to you guys, so you guys go ahead because I certainly have my opinion. Go right ahead.
Let me help you out. I think the path is simple. I think two things have to happen, and really, I think it's only two things. Stanford has to thump USC, and I mean thump them. Not necessarily 59-0, but they got to beat them soundly. And secondly, North Carolina's got to beat Clemson. Now, here's the problem for my beloved Card. I don't think either of those things is going to happen. I like Stanford's chances against USC straight up. This is not likely to be a blowout. It's probably not likely to be as big a blowout as the Stanford-USC game earlier this season at the Coliseum. I could see the Card getting by 3 to 6 points, but I don't see a blowout happening. There's a lot of talent on the USC team. And I want to believe in North Carolina, but I just can't. So North Carolina would have to win a close one. If they thump Clemson, they probably climb back up into the top 4. But it would have to be a close Carolina win. I don't think they have the ponies to beat Clemson, particularly in the trenches on either side of the football. So I think best case for Stanford, go ahead and beat USC, go to the Rose Bowl, probably play Ohio State because I think the Iowa-Michigan State winner goes into the top 4. I don't think there's any way Ohio State climbs back into the top 4. They'd have to be placed in over a Michigan State team that just beat them 2 weeks ago, or over an Iowa team that's undefeated, Big Ten champ that they didn't play. So I just don't see a path for OSU to get into the top 4.
What's funny, guys, is that, as you know, I talk to bloggers all over the country, and the more I talk to people and they lay out their dream scenario, and most people want chaos, or they're obviously rooting for a conference or a team, and they need a lot of things to happen. They don't even touch, in their dream scenario, Florida beating Alabama. That's how far-fetched that is. People don't even say, in my dream scenario, they just don't. They think that's so highly unlikely that I don't even go there in my dream scenario.
They lost 27-2 to Florida State a week ago.
They're still going to line up 11 guys.
They're going to get hammered is what's going to happen.
They probably are. But they're still going to line up probably 8 guys on defense that will get a sniff in the NFL. It's possible. There's like a 3% chance I'm going to give it.
Are they playing Treon Harris at quarterback?
They're playing Treon Harris at quarterback.
Yeah, you could cut that chance in half, dude.
You're right. You're right. Nick, what's the Stanford scenario?
Well, we're going to find out just how much a conference championship is worth and whether or not it's actually worth an extra loss. I think strength of schedule certainly will help there too, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they're just going to automatically leapfrog a one-loss team when they've got 2 losses like that. Yeah, I don't see Florida pulling it out. Would be completely hilarious to see it. It won't happen, but it would be hilarious to have the SEC be held out of the playoffs. But even if North Carolina beats Clemson, you'll have Clemson with one loss and no conference championship, OSU with one loss and no conference championship, and probably, let's say, Iowa with one loss and no conference championship. Is a 2-loss team with a tougher conference and a conference championship going to leapfrog all of them? I don't know. I don't think that's a foregone conclusion. I think a lot of folks want it to be, but I don't know. I don't think that's. But at the same time, everyone said, "Oh, you go out, you win your conference championship game, you can leapfrog from 7th, 8th, or 6th right into the top 4, and it's just fine." At least that's what happened last year. So
yeah. We'll see.
I don't know.
Do you guys realize that if Hunter Henry, the tight end for Arkansas, doesn't whip the football over his head on a 4th and 25 play in the Ole Miss-Arkansas game in overtime, Alabama's at home with one loss, and maybe they're perceived a little bit different. They would be perceived differently by the College Football Playoff Committee as a non-conference champion, still with one loss. Ole Miss is playing with 2 losses in the SEC championship game. Man, I wish that would have happened.
Me too. Now, that would have been fascinating. That would have been something. Because I don't think they could have left a one-loss Alabama team out. I think that would have been really intriguing. Those other 3 teams Nick just mentioned, I could easily see all 3 of them getting left out with just a lone loss. Alabama, I don't see it. So I think you would have gotten Alabama and whoever wound up winning that SEC championship game, particularly if it were Ole Miss with just the one loss.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with the win over Alabama.
I'm going to, from what I remember, now that we've got 3 scenarios played out between the 3 of you, I'm trying to sort it out in my head, but I think I'm going to disagree somewhat with Don here in that I think this is what has to happen for Stanford. The Big Ten winners in, the other teams out. Oklahoma's in, Alabama, we're going to assume, gets a win. North Carolina needs to defeat Clemson. Then you've got the matchup between North Carolina, Ohio State, and Stanford. Well, regardless of what most people think, even that watch football and think Ohio State's one of the 4 best teams in the country, in that scenario, they've got the worst resume of the 3. They didn't go to a conference championship game. They didn't win it. They don't have a strong strength of schedule. They just, I don't think, can overcome that. So even Stanford with 2 losses, I think, has a better resume than Ohio State. They have a better resume than North Carolina, but then you've got to play the conference championship against the conference championship. That would be the interesting question to see. A North Carolina team with a lesser strength of schedule that just beat the number 1 team in the country, has won 12 consecutive games, conference champion with 1 loss. Does that outweigh the 2-loss Stanford team that's beaten a better schedule and has the conference championship?
Yeah, and that's why I say Stanford had to absolutely roll USC, and they need North Carolina to win on a last-second field goal by 1. And I really don't think either is going to happen. I really don't. I think we're splitting hairs there, but I think that the closing statements have to be very compelling in Stanford's favor, and I don't see it. So I'm not. You're actually kind of agreeing with me. You're saying it differently.
Okay, maybe I am. I've been confused after listening to all 3 of you. I didn't know who spit out what by the time it was all said and done.
I don't even know if I gave you a scenario. I just kind of said I hope it all comes to rest. I don't even know what needs to happen. I kind of agree with both of you guys, though. Like, you definitely need Stanford to absolutely manhandle USC. It can't just be a 10-point win like they did last time, even though it was really impressive. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, considering how Helton utilizes personnel. He just utilizes personnel, at least in my opinion, much more better than Sarkisian does.
For sure. And the power run game, it's going to be a shorter game, if you will. There aren't going to be as many points to be had as there were at the Coliseum. So I don't see a blowout happening.
If I'm a betting man, I take Stanford as a 2-loss team over North Carolina as the ACC champ.
Yeah,
I agree.
I would say
So do I.
Yeah,
I agree.
In the matchup, but also in predicting what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to do.
I think that's possible, but I still think Stanford had better be impressive in its win.
What surprised me was to see the other day that the probability index that ESPN promotes had Ohio State as a 22% chance to get to the college football playoff. I don't know how in the world they're figuring that out.
Yeah, I don't
To
see
me,
it.
they've got like a 1.5% chance.
I agree. That we can agree on.
Don't know how they figure that out.
Yeah, they would have to bump 2 other conference champions. Yeah, I can't see it.
Clemson would even have an argument against Ohio State if they lost.
Yes, they would.
Exactly.
With the win over Notre Dame, you betcha.
Yeah, with a win over Notre Dame and Florida State and getting to the conference championship game and being the number 1 team up to that point. And
I
let's
agree.
say they lose a 30-28 game.
I agree. Clemson would have a better resume than OSU in that scenario.
Yeah, may not be the better team, but I love when people throw around better teams. None of us have any idea who the best teams are.
No, we
That's
don't.
why I go on the resume, not who do I think is the best team. All right, now that we've sorted through all that, who's going to win the Pac-12 championship game?
Oh, man.
Or maybe the better question is, what does USC have to do to spring the upset? We'll start with Nick.
Got to contain McCaffrey first and foremost. Yeah. I think it's been made pretty clear at this point. If you're gonna hang in with them, have any chance of beating them, you've got to contain McCaffrey. Probably gonna want to crash the box so you can have Bad Hogan show up.
Yeah.
And your margin of error is just going to be very small, especially when both sides are going to try to run a lot and really limit the possessions. Margin of error is razor thin. You can't have turnovers. USC's pretty solid there. And then if things, hold form like they have last, 2-3 weeks now, you're going to have to get it done in the red zone. 3s instead of 7s are probably going to do you in. USC hasn't been elite there, but they're going to have to figure out something in the red zone. If they're getting 3s each time, it's just not going to be enough.
Hey, Kaylin, if you were with me, I thought I was smarter than Vegas, and I took UCLA as a 3-point underdog against USC. It's not like I thought it was a no-brainer, but I just thought UCLA was playing better football, and with that leaky defense of the Trojans, I thought UCLA was going to win the game. Now, USC really showed up and pounded them, so that has to provide a little bit of hope for the Trojans.
Yeah, it certainly should, especially like Nick just pointed out. If you get bad Kevin Hogan, and I actually named him as my most improved player of the season because last year you didn't see this kind of consistency out of him, especially after the first game against Notre Dame. I thought, man, we're not going to have a good year out of him, but he's really turned it on this year, and I think McCaffrey, like Nick said, has a lot to do with it. But you got to pray somehow that he ends up having a bad game, like they forced Josh Rosen to have last week. Granted, he's a freshman. I think that you can get Hogan in similar situations, like Nick pointed out. You crash the box and you make sure that you contain McCaffrey. You don't really open up that play-action passing game, which Hogan, in my opinion, I think he excels at, especially during the deep ball and taking shots down the field. We'll see if Austin Hooper has any impact like he did Austin Hooper has any impact like he did last game. And then for USC as well, offensively, you really need to make sure that you keep Juju Smith-Schuster involved in the game. One of my gripes with SC, and I don't know, Nick can probably point it out to me, but I felt like USC kind of veered away from throwing the ball to him in the second half against Stanford and kind of tried to run the clock out instead of be more aggressive on the offensive end. I know Clay Helton is more balanced, I guess, in his offensive approach, and he likes to run the ball a bit more, but I think Juju Smith-Schuster and Darius Rogers, all your other playmakers on the outside of Dory Jackson, you need to make sure that you're getting the ball in their hands if you're going to have a chance of beating Stanford, especially if Kevin Hogan has a good game and Christian McCaffrey does as well.
Hey, Don, let's frame it up like this. Since you know the Cardinal like few, we can all understand that they're a decided favorite and should be. Where do you feel that they could be vulnerable?
Yeah, turnovers. I think Nick actually hit the nail on the head. The USC defensive front, which is formidable, needs to bring out bad Kevin Hogan, put some pressure on him, force a mistake or two, get him to put the ball on the ground or throw a couple of picks, and make the mistakes that he really hasn't made much all year long. There was the fourth quarter against Oregon. With a couple of drops, and it may have been due to the beating he was taken by their D-line all day. In the Northwestern game where he was just inaccurate and kind of all over the place. other than that, he's really been nails. And throughout the Pac-12 season, and honestly, I think he got hosed a little bit just because he didn't have the kind of numbers that the guys who were the co-first-team quarterbacks had. I actually think he's been the best quarterback in the conference throughout the course of conference play this year. Here's the flip side of that. There was a great stat, by ESPN's David Lombardi, who's written 437 articles this week. He's just been cranking them out. The man's been a machine. But the stat is this: McCaffrey has had 22 rushes of 10 or more yards against a box with 8+ defenders in it. So in other words, you're shaking your head in the Notre Dame game. And you're like, well, why do they keep giving him the ball? Obviously, the line is stacked. Well, because he's been beating it. And once he gets past that first wave, he might go. And that 22 rushes, by the way, of 10+ yards against an eight-man plus front is 6 more than the second highest number by any running back in the nation. So he's a little guy, but what he has managed to do, even in phone booth situations, has been exceptionally impressive.
I'm doing a little homework, enjoying listening to you guys break this thing down, because I'm trying to size up the North Carolina wins versus the Stanford wins.
Yeah, it's not that close.
No, it's not that close, because after North Carolina defeats Clemson, which we're assuming, it's their best win. Off the top of my head, and you guys know how much I talk this, so I pretty much have these schedules locked and loaded. The best win that they have other than Clemson is Pitt, Miami, Virginia Tech.
And two of those other wins are against FCS opponents, and Stanford didn't play any. So that it's really, really a poor resume.
Illinois, Georgia Tech, they beat. So for Stanford, let me know if I'm forgetting somebody. Notre Dame, USC twice, UCLA, Washington State, Cal.
Yeah.
So they've got what I would consider like 6 quality wins.
Yeah, UW's not horrible. Arizona's bowl eligible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd rank them with Virginia Tech, Miami. Sure. So you're like 8 deep for Stanford, and you're like 3 or 4 deep. And then you're really quality teams, you're like 4 to 5 deep for Stanford, and you're 1 deep for North Carolina. And we still have yet to see the one be played.
Yeah, you have a point. So we'll see how serious the committee is about that. I think, though, and this is part of the point, it's hard. If North Carolina wins the championship over the team that was undefeated, #1 all year, that would go far. It would be 1 win, but it would be the best win anybody's had all season.
Yeah.
This takes us out of the Pac-12 realm, but you guys follow all of it, and I'm a bit amused, and you guys know my fan angle on this, that Ohio State's given some consideration. And can you imagine the holy hell that would be raised if the committee selected 2 teams from the Big Ten and left out 2 other conferences?
Yep.
I wouldn't put
That's
it
not
past
going to happen.
I would put it past them. That's why I don't think it'll happen.
Everyone in that room might think that Ohio State's one of the 4 best teams, but they just can't pull the trigger on that. You just can't do it.
I don't think they want to live with that blowback. Yeah, and I think people underestimate this and forget it. It's the 4 best teams, but for all intents and purposes, these people are politicians, and they've got reputations, and they don't want to get dragged through the mud after they walk out of that room following the deliberations. I think politically it's going to be an untenable thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Nick, take us through the Pac-12 championship game, how this thing's going to play out, and if you can give us a winner, unless you're reserving that for the site. Oh, I think we lost Nick for a second. We'll jump on board with Kalen here. So how do you think this thing's going to play out?
I think it goes similar to the previous matchup. If I remember correctly, SC pounded the ball at first, and they utilized that to turn into a play-action game. Stanford came out throwing the ball. At least, Dom, or you gotta correct me if I'm wrong, Dom. I think it plays out a similar fashion, though. I just think that you're going to see more reliance upon the run from USC. Final score, I'd probably say around like 31-28, and I think it's Stanford. I'm really not sure, though. I think it's a flip of the coin again, just like last week for USC UCLA.
Yep.
Really? You think it's a flip of the coin?
Yeah, I think it's a bit closer than people think it will be. I think USC, the way they're playing right now, and I mean, Stanford's definitely been balling, but I think that USC, the momentum with which they're entering this game after coming out, kind of reclaiming LA, I wouldn't put it past them, especially with Clay Helton as their head coach. He's definitely he's looked more impressive. This unit has definitely looked different since he's taken over.
All right, Don, how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, let me tell you how interesting this is. The ESPN Football Power Index actually has USC with a 51.5% chance to win the game.
Wow.
So the ESPN FPI actually has SC favored. The Sharps in Vegas have Stanford minus 4.0 right about now. I was going to say the exact same number that Kalen said and the exact same outcome. I think it's yet another Conrad Ukrapina kick late. I think it's a field goal game one way or the other. I have Stanford coming out on top. I don't think Stanford's going to come out slinging it this time. I think there's going to be a whole bunch of running, albeit maybe some more creativity, kind of like what we saw in the third quarter of the Notre Dame game. A little bit of misdirection, bringing Bryce Love in to play decoy a little bit, and doing some interesting things with he and McCaffrey on the field at the same time, and setting up some play action. You might see a flea flicker. I think you're going to see Hogan use the pass relatively discreetly, and I think you're going to see the offense try to continue to click and run some of those long drives like they pulled off against Notre Dame last week. So I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring barn burner. I think 31-28, 28-24, something like that. I've got Stanford just squeaking by. I don't think it's a blowout by any means.
Guys, I've got to say, I am shocked. I was expecting 41-24, 45-20, that Stanford was going to roll in this game. I'm not saying I'm disagreeing. I'm just I haven't really tried to figure it out myself at this point, but I'm a bit surprised. So now we'll hear from Nick. How do you think this thing's going to play out, Nick?
One good game against UCLA, and everyone sort of forgets about the 4 or so games USC played before that, where they looked very confused against Oregon. They did not look sharp against Colorado to start the game.
Yes.
I was listening to Clay Helton talk about someone who had asked him a question about, your young secondary gets confused and they have communications problems. And he mentioned something about how Stanford has, I think, like over 40 or 50 plus formations and packages they run. That's pretty horrifying because it's not like the Oregon passing attack was super complicated, but it apparently was very confusing. So that gives me concern. And UCLA was the first game USC decided to actually blitz. Like every other game is literally one series at most. So, which USC are we going to get? If we get the one against UCLA, yeah, you could get it'll be a bit of a field goal fest, but you could get like a 33-27. I think Stanford still pulls it out. If we get the team that started off against Colorado or, played at any point against Oregon, you're probably looking like a 38-17 Stanford win. So, I don't know. They're riding high, but I think you got to go with the guys that have been there before. And so I think Stanford takes this. It should be close. They seem to always play each other close. That 10-point win earlier in September was apparently a bit of a blowout for this game. So,
yep.
I don't know, but I think Stanford probably by 4 to 7 sounds right.
All right, so if you guys are as expert as I think you are, then we've got a Stanford win, then we'll wait to see what happens on Sunday.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, it's always a good time on the Pac-12 Breakdown with this week with Kalen Jones from House of Sparky, Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree and Conquest Chronicles, and also from Last Word on Sports, we've got Don King, and I will be interested to break down the numbers once we get past all the bowl games, because I still think that this might be the best conference in America when it's all said and done, despite most likely being left out of the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Could
All right,
happen.
guys. Until next week when we talk winner of the Pac-12, set up the bowl projections, and really start to break down the postseason. You guys have a great week, and thanks for jumping on board.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Be good.
Thanks, Mark.